Hi, I'm Steve Mann and this is Paper Classroom. Welcome to another water and chemical additives tutorial. The topic of this particular tutorial is chemical additives. So on this particular tutorial, I'll just briefly go over what the chemical additives are and the types of chemical additive, and then I'm going to do a video on each of them. So there are two types of chemical aids that are used in the paper industry. There are process aids, and a process aid is there to help the process. The clue is in the name, process aid. But it's amazing how many students get confused between process aids and functional aids. Now, a functional aid is there for the customer. A customer demands something or requests something in the specification, and we add something to the sheet to make it do what the customer wants it to do. So functional aids are for the customer and they change the sheet. So an example of each. So for a functional aid, we might say the customer requests a red piece of paper. So therefore we will put in a red dye or a red pigment. So the red dye or pigment is a functional aid. They may want to make the surface of the sheet water repellent. So we would add a sizing agent. So a sizing agent is a functional aid. If on the other hand we've got large amounts of froth and foam in our process and it's making froth spots in the sheet and it's causing holes and breaks, then we would add something to kill all that froth. We would add materials such as silicones or high molecular weight alcohols, and they would kill off all the froth and the foam. So they help our process. So it's a process aid. The customer doesn't know about that. The customer doesn't need to know about that. He doesn't want to know about that. So process aids help the process. Functional aids change the sheet to meet customer needs or customer demands or customer specifications. So here's a list of the process aids and the functional aids that we're going to be talking about for level 2. At level 3, we go into some of these in a bit more detail and we do other things as well. So process aids, antifoam deformer, I've just told you about that. High molecular weight alcohols, silicones, things like that. Biocides to kill off all the bugs. So if you don't have bugs, you don't have slime, you won't get slime spots, you'll get less sheet breaks, you'll get less holes in the sheet. So it helps the process. It's a process aid. Retention aid, that's there to make the process more economical. It retains more things in the sheet as it's being formed so that it doesn't go through the wire and out to the effluent plant. And then you've got, stickies control agents, more often used if you're a recycled mill, but stickies cause horrendous problems. If you can add chemicals to control them, then you're going to improve the economics of your process again. But the customer doesn't care about what we do for any of that. It's nothing to do with them. However, for functional aids, that is the customer's domain. They may specify a particular brightness of sheet or a smoothness or a porosity. And fillers help us achieve that. Fillers are brighter than fibre. So the customer will care how much filler we put in. He may want a nice strong sheet to go through a printing process. So dry strength additives are important. So the customer needs to know the strength of the sheet. He doesn't need to know how much dry strength additive we've put in or what we've put in, but he does need to measure the strength of the sheet. Similar for wet strength, you put in wet strength additives. I mentioned earlier having a red sheet, so colouring materials are important. They need to know that the colour is right. And sizing agents, give water repellency to the surface of the sheet. It stops the penetration of liquids into the surface. So they need to know how well it prevents the penetration. So there are things like cob tests where we measure that. So those are important. Now, interestingly, some of these actually do both jobs. They can be both a functional aid and a process aid. We usually put these materials in as a functional aid because they give us something the customer wants. But because of the chemical nature of the material, a sort of added value, if you will, it does something else. So here are 3 examples. Cationic starch. We put cationic starch in the sheet to give the sheet dry strength. In other words, it improves the tensile of the paper, but only when the paper's dry. Now, because the starch is cationic, it's got a big positive charge. We have that big positive charge so that it will stick to the fibre. It doesn't just stick to the fibre, it attracts other fibres towards it. Therefore, it also acts as a retention aid. Another one is chymene, or PAE, or PAAE, as some people call it. This is a very, very well-known wet strength agent. So we put it in to give wet strength in tea bags, for example. But chymene, like a cationic starch, has a strong positive charge associated with it. And therefore, it will attract all the negatively charged fibres. So it will also act as a retention aid. And finally, things like chalk and clay. I've excluded titanium dioxide from this because titanium dioxide is a lot more expensive than fibre. These are a lot cheaper than fibre. So we add chalk and clay to improve the brightness of the sheet, or to improve the smoothness of the sheet, or the opacity. And so chalk and clay are also a lot cheaper than fibre. You may pay, about £100 a tonne for chalk and clay, roughly. You might pay £500 a tonne for fibre, minimum, if it's virgin fibre. So for every tonne of chalk or clay you can put in the sheet, you are saving £400 worth of fibre. So you can see how some materials can be both a process aid and a functional aid. So that's all I want to say on this introduction to chemical additives. I hope you found that informative. I look forward to seeing you in another one of our videos shortly. Bye for now.